Hey, happy Social Distancing Wednesday, everybody. To all of you from OCC, to all of you who specifically are regulars at Midweek Bible Study, but also to anyone from OCC or even beyond OCC who may be viewing this video, greetings to you. This, if my count is correct, is Social Distancing Wednesday number 5. And if you're like me, you're dearly and deeply missing being in person more in your day to day life and in your week to week life. I so look forward to the days when on a Wednesday morning we can get back to having Bible study in person, in fellowship hall, with paper handouts that we're not afraid to touch, with candy and other treats, and sitting in a circle together and not having to worry about this virus. But for the time being, here we are via video. And so I do want us to spend a little bit of time exploring a psalm today. But before we get there, I thought I would take this opportunity to share just a few thoughts, a few reflections on an S word, a word that begins with S, and I'll do another S word next week, and probably another one after that. So this will be a little bit of a mini series here just at the beginning. The S word I want to focus on today is surprise. Surprise. I actually have been blessed by a few different surprises, and lately, just within the last 2 or 3 days, and I just wanted to share them with you because they certainly have brightened my days recently. One is Easter cards. Easter cards. I honestly, I'm not sure I can remember ever receiving an Easter card in years past. But this year I received not an overwhelming ton, but a handful of greeting cards for Easter. Some from some of you that are probably watching this video. And that did brighten my mood, kind of lift my spirits. And I just wanted to say that I was both surprised by it and I'm grateful for it. In fact, Linda Gavin was the sender of one of those cards, and she included a wonderful little written message of encouragement, particularly with regard to Bible study and the prospects that we will again meet at some point, hopefully in the not too distant future, face to face in person. Another surprise was a piece of mail I got yesterday. And it was from a charitable organization that I have supported for quite a number of years now. It's called the Carter Center, and it is run by Jimmy and Rosalind Carter, the former president and first lady of the U.S. And they do some wonderful work. It's not a political organization. They mostly work on disease treatments in parts of Africa and parts of Southern Asia. They've worked extensively on trying to eradicate some ailments and some things like guinea worm, and so both diseases and parasites, some sort of public health issues, particularly in developing nations. They do great work. Well, they sent me their newsletter, and that typically happens, every couple months or whatever. And it usually is accompanied by a letter asking, of course, for a donation. And that's typical. I'm sure all of you get mail like that from various organizations too. The letter yesterday didn't ask for a donation, and there was no return envelope for a donation enclosed in the piece of mail that I received. The letter brought greetings from the former president and first lady, And at the end of the letter, it simply said, we actually recommend that you not send a donation to the Carter Center at this time, but instead that you direct your donations at this time to organizations in your own local community that are addressing human needs arising from the COVID-19 pandemic. And I thought, wow, I don't think I have ever before received a piece of mail from a charitable organization that has recommended or urged me to not donate to that organization at this time, but instead directed me to donate elsewhere and given me some guidance on that. I thought, wow, that is such a sort of selfless thing for them to do. They certainly could have just decided not to send out the mail at all, not to send the newsletter, not to send a letter at all. But they did. They sent out the regular newsletter, but then with this highly irregular cover letter suggesting that I donate locally to pantries or other organizations that are addressing the human needs right now because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I thought, wow, that to me says something about the broader vision of the Carter Center as an organization and about the former president and first lady in particular. So that also was a surprise, a second surprise. Easter cards, and then that piece of mail from the Carter Center, and one more surprise, and that was a poem that is about the virus and kind of ironically has gone viral. In fact, you may have seen this already, but it bears repeating. It's a wonderfully clever poem that clearly was written not that many days ago, and the author is someone named Christy Bother, and I'll put her information, also the website, which is her blog from which this came, and also all the words to this poem. I'll put those up on the screen as I read it for you. It's a little bit long, but it's mighty clever, and I think you'll get a kick out of it. It has a Dr. Seuss sort of cadence to it. So here we go. It's entitled, again, How the Virus Stole Easter. 'Twas late in 19 when the virus began, bringing chaos and fear to all people, each land. People were sick, hospitals full, doctors overwhelmed, no one in school. As winter gave way to the promise of spring, the virus raged on, touching peasant and king. People hid in their homes from the enemy unseen. They YouTubed and Zoomed, social distanced and cleaned. April approached, and churches were closed. There won't be an Easter, the world supposed. There won't be church services, and egg hunts are out. No reason for new dresses when we can't go about. Holy Week started, as bleak as the rest. The world was focused on masks and on tests. Easter can't happen this year, they proclaimed. Online and at home, it just won't be the same. Maundy Thursday, Good Friday. The days came and went. The virus pressed on. It just would not relent. The world woke Sunday and nothing had changed. The virus still menaced. The people estranged. Pooh-pooh to the saints, the world was grumbling. They're finding out now that no Easter is coming. They're just waking up. I know just what they'll do. Their mouths will hang open a minute or two, and then all the saints will all cry boo-hoo. That noise, said the world, would be something to hear. So it paused, and the world put a hand to its ear. And it did hear a sound coming through all the skies. It started down low, then it started to rise. But the sound wasn't depressed. Why, this sound was triumphant. It couldn't be so, but it grew with abundance. The world stared around, popping its eyes. Then it shook. What it saw was a shocking surprise. Each saint in each nation, the tall and the small, was celebrating Jesus in spite of it all. It hadn't stopped Easter from coming. It came. Somehow or other, it came just the same. And the world, with its life quite stuck in quarantine, stood puzzling and puzzling. Just how can it be? It came without bonnets. It came without bunnies. It came without egg hunts, cantatas, or money. Then the world thought of something it hadn't before. Maybe Easter, it thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Easter, perhaps, means a little bit more. And what happened then? Well, the story's not done. What will you do? Will you share with that one or two people needing hope in this night? Will you share of the source of your life in this fight? The churches are empty, but so is the tomb. And Jesus is victor over death, doom, and gloom. So this year at Easter, let this be our prayer. As the virus still rages all around everywhere, may the world see hope when it looks at God's people. May the world see the church is not a building or steeple. May the world find faith in Jesus' death and resurrection. May the world find joy in a time of dejection. May 2020 be known as the year of survival. But not only that, let it start a revival. Wow, what a great poem, huh? I mean, it really does have that How the Grinch Stole Christmas feel to it. I think it's just incredibly clever of this author to come up with it. And so I wanted to share it with you in case anyone out there hasn't already seen it, either in written or spoken form. Just really good stuff. So like I said, I do want us to spend a few minutes talking about a particular psalm. And some of you were part of our Midweek Bible study series, about a year ago, when we did an overview of the Psalms. So some of this may be a bit of a refresher course or a review for you, and that's okay. But just briefly to put some context on this. Historically, here's a slide up on the screen that'll have a bit of a timeline for you. Historically, around 1,000 and change before the Common Era came a period of time in the history of Israel that is called the United Kingdom. So this is a time after the period of the Judges, when the people said, this kind of rule by committee, which was the period of the Judges, it isn't working out as well as maybe we had hoped or even as well as it used to. Maybe it's time for a singular king. And so it became King Saul. Now, keep in mind, the numbers on the timeline are moving backwards or in reverse because, of course, this is before the Common Era. That abbreviation under the year 1000 BCE stands for before the Common Era. Or for those of you who are kind of more old school, you may have learned just BC, before Christ. That's okay too. But that's where we're at. So that period, the United Kingdom, went from, like I say, 1,000 and change to sort of the late 900s. So a little bit more than a century or so. And it encompassed not only the reign of Saul, but the reigns of David and of Solomon. This period was a high point in the history of Israel, kind of the height of their military power, their sense of security, their economic development. This is sort of viewed as kind of a golden age or kind of a high water point for the nation of Israel. Now, then things did change. Starting in the late 900s and going forward, there's a period that is known historically as the divided kingdom. The people began to kind of fracture and split, and it really did end up becoming the case that there were two distinct kingdoms. One in the north, which was called Israel, which had a capital city of Samaria, and then one in the southern part of the Holy Land, which it was called Judah, with a capital of Jerusalem. And as you can see, this period lasted quite a long time, from 900-ish all the way to 600-ish, and a little bit further than that even. During that time, in the late 700s, the northern kingdom actually was invaded and fell to the Assyrian Empire. So there was plenty of strife and anxiety and a sense of being under threat that was part of that divided kingdom period. It was not viewed as sort of the golden age. By comparison, the United Kingdom had a lot going for it compared to the issues that were present in the divided kingdom. And then, kind of the next chapter in this is a period called the exile. That's when the Babylonian Empire swept in from the east, from a part of land, a chunk of real estate that today we would call Iraq, and they swept in and they conquered the southern kingdom of Judah and took people into exile, took them captive back to Babylonia. And there they sat for roughly half a century or so in captivity. And then we have the period of the Restoration. And as you see on the screen, I couldn't even fit onto this timeline the whole word restoration. That was too long, so I just went with the word restore. But it did go from the late 500s and all into the 400s. It went forward as well. This was the period after the Persians had overthrown the Babylonians and had released the captives, had released the exiles to go back to their homeland. And so they did, and they went back half a century or so after having been taken captive. They returned home and began the process of rebuilding their society in their homeland. So a pretty powerful arc of history here over, roughly 500 years, a little bit more than that, from the United Kingdom to the divided kingdom to the exile and then to the restoration. The Psalms, the 150 Psalms that we have in the Bible, are thought to have been written variously across this entire period, even though traditionally the Psalms have mainly been attributed to David. Biblical scholars these days, widely believe that some of the Psalms may have their roots all the way back to the United Kingdom, but a lot of them were probably written during the period of the divided kingdom, and a lot of them were probably written during the exile from captivity, and maybe even a few from the period of the restoration. So the point being, some Psalms were written during really, really great times, and some Psalms were written during really, really awful times. That's just the reality of the situation. Okay, so Psalms, as some of you will recall from our study last year, can be categorized in all kinds of different ways. Maybe the simplest is to break them down into three categories. You have laments, meaning you have psalms that are sort of crying out and out of a sense of despair. And then you have thanksgivings, giving thanks to God for all sorts of blessings. And then you have hymns of praise, some hymns that are associated with the coronation of a king, all sorts of things. Each of these three categories clearly can be subdivided with different subsets within them. Psalm 6 is the psalm that I'd love for us to spend just a few minutes on today. And that psalm is more specifically categorized as a penitential lament. A penitential lament. So it is a lament, but of a fairly specific kind. In fact, in the New Revised Standard Version, there is a little title sort of subheading under Psalm 6, at the top of Psalm 6. And that heading that the NRSV has given to this psalm is Prayer for Recovery from Grave Illness. And here we go. It's not a long psalm. It's only 2 screens worth of text here for you. But it is powerful stuff. O Lord, do not rebuke me in your anger, or discipline me in your wrath. Be gracious to me, O Lord, for I am languishing. O Lord, heal me, for my bones are shaking with terror. My soul also is struck with terror, while you, O Lord, how long? Turn, O Lord, save my life. Deliver me for the sake of your steadfast love, for in death there is no remembrance of you. In Sheol, who can give you praise? I am weary with my moaning. Every night I flood my bed with tears. I drench my couch with weeping. My eyes waste away because of grief. They grow weak because of all my foes. Depart from me, all you workers of evil, for the Lord has heard the sound of my weeping. The Lord has heard my supplication. The Lord accepts my prayer. All my enemies shall be ashamed and struck with terror. They shall turn back and in a moment be put to shame. So obviously, the author of this psalm is writing out of a sense of despair and a sense of petitioning God for help in a difficult time. And specifically, some scholars believe a difficult time related to some sort of a disease, which we can relate to right now. We're all facing extraordinary difficulties right now because of a virus that is brand new to the human race, made a jump from bats somewhere, it's thought, to humans. And so here we are, facing all kinds of challenges and difficulties because of an illness, not unlike what's going on in this psalm. Take a look at all the ways, just a listing of the ways that the human condition is described in this psalm. The human condition is described here as languishing, with bones shaking in terror, soul struck with terror. We're weary, moaning, weeping, grieving, our eyes growing weak, facing foes. And of course, during the time that this psalm was probably written, the word foes primarily would have referred to invading countries, opposing military forces. But certainly, we have heard plenty of folks describing the novel coronavirus or COVID-19 as an enemy or as a foe that we are in a fight against. And so we can certainly interpret that word foes for our own times as pertaining to the virus. Notice that in the psalm, there's a plea to God to not do a couple of things. Number one, not to rebuke people. And number two, not to discipline people. And I guess we can relate to that as well. Obviously, the word discipline has come in our time to be associated with supervision in the workplace or with parenting. And I don't know any kid alive that likes the thought of being disciplined by his parents, his or her parents, because that would usually mean something like being punished, being grounded, having a stricter curfew imposed or something like that as a punishment for some bad deed, some bad behavior. We certainly don't, in our day, think that the coronavirus is some sort of punishment from God. I certainly don't believe that for a moment. But the psalmist here clearly is saying, please God, don't bring punishment or negative consequences upon us. Don't rebuke us. Don't discipline us, please. And then there's another side to the psalm where the psalmist is basically saying, please God, do these things. Do be gracious. Do heal. Do save. Do deliver. And we can certainly relate to that too. We certainly hope that God will be an actor, will be involved in bringing an end to the crisis surrounding COVID-19. How that happens is, of course, a great and cosmic mystery. How exactly will God intervene in the situation, if at all? Will God be a guiding force that helps our scientists and our political leaders to arrive at the right answers at the right times? How exactly will God guide and inspire us to find the right path forward? But we certainly can relate to the psalmist's plea. God, please do these things. Be gracious to us. Show us grace. Heal us. Save us. Deliver us. So it's a very old psalm, at least 2.5 millennia old, and maybe a bit more. But it is timely for our day. And so in closing today, and often we close with a prayer, today we will as well, but the prayer will simply be a slightly adapted version that I've put together of this psalm. I've simply pluralized it, frankly. Instead of the psalmist's references to I and me and my, the references here are going to be to us and we and ours. And this certainly can be our prayer, even today. So let's bow together. O Lord, do not rebuke us in your anger, or discipline us in your wrath. Be gracious to us, O Lord, for we are languishing. O Lord, heal us, for our bones are shaking with terror. Our souls also are struck with terror. While you, O Lord, how long? Turn, O Lord, save our lives. Deliver us for the sake of your steadfast love, for in death there is no remembrance of you. In Sheol, who can give you praise? We are weary with our moaning. Every night we flood our beds with tears. We drench our couches with our weeping. Our eyes waste away because of grief. They grow weak because of all our foes. Depart from us, all you workers of evil, for the Lord has heard the sound of our weeping. The Lord has heard our supplications. The Lord accepts our prayers. All our enemies shall be ashamed and struck with terror. They shall turn back, and in a moment be put to shame. Amen and amen. Don't forget that each Sunday during this time of social distancing, we post on the YouTube channel here 3 videos. One is Jeff's worship video. One is my message to youth and young adults. The sort of target audience for that is middle school, high school, and college age. But believe me, please consider it to be absolutely fine for any of you to view it. There's nothing closed or secretive about it. Anyone that considers themselves to be just young at heart, even, please go ahead and watch that one as well. And then the third one each Sunday is Amelia's little Sunday school lesson for the children, say kindergarten age up to about 5th grade in our Joyous Journey program. At any of those 3 videos each Sunday morning that you're inclined to view and draw a little bit of inspiration from, please have at it. And that will all be on our YouTube channel each Sunday. Otherwise, from a midweek standpoint, until next Wednesday, I wish you as happy a social distancing experience as is possible, given the realities of social distancing. And of course, I wish for you that you be careful, stay healthy, and be well.